I went from making $12 an hour as a dishwasher to over 30 grand a month in less than 4 years. Now, it's easy for me to sit here and act like I had it all figured out. I had this Midas touch, but we're gonna dive into the real. Who am I to sit here and give you all of the sexiness of the lifestyle that I have now without talking about the times where I fell on my motherfucking face, which was many times. The whole entrepreneurial journey, it all dates back to my senior year of high school. I remember my boy Andrew, he invited me to his gym and he went to a luxury gym. It was like one of the best gyms in the state. And I remember in this gym, we went to the sauna. First of all, this was my first time ever even being in a sauna. And in there was this Asian dude who had a bunch of tattoos. And I remember this guy saying that he does real estate and he makes like 60 grand a month. And that totally changed how I viewed the world, how I viewed money, because I didn't think anything like that was possible. This guy was super rich. He was showing us people who he's mentored who are also pretty young, like under 30. And it opened my eyes that like there's really money out there. And so after that conversation, I went down this entire rabbit hole around real estate. I thought real estate was going to be the thing for me. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos. That's when I came across Graham Stephan. I wanted to be an investor and I wanted to get into real estate because the only rich person I'd ever seen my entire life who I'd actually spoken to up until that point was in real estate. So I was like, fuck it, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. This is the path that I'm going to take. I very quickly learned though that real estate is a long game and it really only makes sense if you have money. And at the time, I was preparing to go to college. I didn't want to go to college, but this is only a few months before and I didn't really have any other option. So I was like, fuck it, I'll go make my parents happy. And so like right after the first semester, so this was winter of my freshman year, this is where I came across online money. And so at this time, I'm in college for something I don't care about. We have like 2 or 3 months before the next semester and I wanted to figure something out. And so I'd go to like different MLM events. Something always felt fishy about that. I never really took action on that. And I looked into trading. I thought trading was going to be the thing, but staring at a bunch of graphs all day also didn't appeal to me. And so I looked at a couple different traditional businesses like brick and mortar, and I was like, fuck, this is going to be such a heavy lift. And nothing really seemed to click. Nothing really seemed like to make sense. And this is probably over the course of like a month and a half, right? Out of like the 2 to 3 months that you have off for school, I was just like immersing myself in all this research about how can I make money, right? How can I be like this dude that I saw in the sauna? How can I be successful without having to go to a bunch of classes that I just don't give a fuck about? And so around this time, as I was looking for different things, a mutual friend of mine, I didn't know this guy, but my boy, he went to school with him and he was a year older. I graduated in 2018. This dude graduated in 2017. So he was like a year older. And I remember my boy telling me about him. He was like crushing it in something called e-com, something called drop shipping. So I followed him and he'd constantly be posting the guru screenshots. Like this is 2019, right? So the guru screenshots of the big dashboards and he'd constantly post that stuff. He was living in the Jet Set Fly House. If anyone's been in the space for that long, like in LA, he was constantly at these concerts and these festivals and he'd be VIP. And I was like, yo, this is the thing I'm gonna do. Whatever the fuck this guy's doing, this is the thing I'm gonna do. So that's when I came across drop shipping. And for years, I tried to make it work. I tested close to 100 products. For literally 2 years, this is all I ate, breathed, and slept is ecom. I got a one-on-one mentor, I went to events, but for some reason, it just would not click. 2 whole years of testing products, of having all the courses, doing all of these things that I felt was right, and nothing working. And even my one-on-one mentor, they had clients who they would literally test the exact same products that we were testing, like they were testing with me and my friend who were partners, and their clients would crush it, but we wouldn't. Sometimes things would get kind of profitable and then they would just die down, maybe like 3 or 4 grand a month. And so making ecom work consumed so much of my life that I literally wouldn't even be present with my family, right? Like I remember my sister's husband's mom, so my mother-in-law, I remember her saying that she was like worried about me because whenever we'd be at dinners, whenever I'd be at their house, I would just be staring off into space because how can I have been trying for so long, working so hard to make this thing work and I'm still failing? And so it was tough for me to be present. Even the people at work would look at me like, Nick, are you okay? So around this time, I disappeared from social media. I didn't post anything for like 6 months and I was like, no, I'm going to make this work. This is where I started going down the whole route of like self-help books, because I realized that the mental side of it and how important the mental side of it is. And so I started going through these self-help books. I started taking real steps to keep my mind sharp as I'm going through this rut. And I also had a note on my thing. I'll put a little screen recording here. I had a thing in my notes app where I would write down anytime someone would give me any kind of doubt, I'd write it there, right? Anytime I heard anything motivational that gave me some kind of a push, maybe from a podcast, from a video like this, I would write it there. And every time I'd get in my head, I would go through that and I would look at the inspiration that I'm giving myself, plus all the hate that I was receiving to making this work. Because I had shit like my manager at the restaurant would be laughing at me, right? He'd be saying, "Are you still doing that pyramid scheme, make money online thing?" Which is funny because now he's one of the main people saying that he's proud of me. Funny how that works. And so it was constant doubt and doubt like that. I remember I had a friend telling me it's impossible to have your own place in your 20s without having a bunch of debt. I wrote that down. And so I disappeared for the 6 months. I intentionally worked on getting my mind right and really having the winning beliefs that it takes to just have success. And eventually it was to the point that my mentors, they dropped us as a client because they couldn't even figure out why nothing is working with us. And so, like I said, this was around the time I took 6 months. I did not post at all on social media. I completely removed myself from the world. And the only thing I ate, breathed, and slept was ecom, self-development, and how am I going to make money? How am I going to make this work? And so I remember during this season, I had a whiteboard in my room. On that whiteboard, I would write X amount of days until I have to sign up for classes again. And this was the timer that I gave myself of this is how long I have to make money. I got to day 1 and I still hadn't made it work. This was like a year and a half in of trying and trying and trying. So during this season, I came across a gentleman named Nate Schmidt. He had a video where he was saying that dropshipping isn't the best business model for beginners because there's just so many skills that you need to learn, so many things that you need to be good at to actually make it work. And so what's actually a better model for beginners is freelance copywriting, where you only take one skill, which is copywriting, and then you go to different businesses and you offer your service to them. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. So I started to go down that rabbit hole, and I took it as a sign to make a pivot, as opposed to trying to learn all of these things when I literally have no business acumen, trying to learn all these things at once. Let me just focus on one thing. Let me just focus on one part of the funnel. And so I decided that I'm going to start an agency offering email marketing services. Thought it made sense because I can only focus on one part of the piece of the puzzle here. And to get to my $3,000 a month goal, it would take me like one client or maybe 2 clients to get there. And so it was in this time I came across a gentleman named Cold Email Wizard, absolute GOAT. He had a course for $200 teaching you how to cold email businesses to be able to sell services like marketing, right? Like email marketing. So I bought that course, I implemented everything. I sent hundreds and hundreds of emails. I finally landed a client who I did a ton of work for before he even paid me, which was a big mistake on my end, but I was hype, I was hungry. I was like, fuck, I finally got a client. We agreed on $1,500 a month, half now, half later. And I just got to work. He gave me access to everything before he even paid me the half. I got to work and he did not pay me. And whenever I'd ask for payment, he would pretty much just ignore the message. And then he'd ask me something about what I'm working on. Long story short, it led to him potentially suing me. And this was right before my 21st birthday. So I was living in Delaware at the time, and I was looking at having to fly to Austin, Texas for a lawsuit. Luckily, we were able to settle it and never got to that, but I went right back. I thought this was going to be it. I thought I was going to be able to stop door dashing. I thought I was going to be able to drop the dishwashing job. Like, I thought this was going to be it. I finally fucking figured out how to make money online. And here I was back at square one. I felt like a total failure. And so I disappeared from the world again. No posts, no going out, no drinking, no smoking, no doing anything that did not relate to me getting to a bag. I totally disappeared from the world. And so during this very defeating, depressing, frustrating part of life, I was driving home one day with my family and I saw a billboard. And the billboard said that it was a marketing agency that was hiring. I thought that was pretty interesting. They were hiring for like an admin role. I instantly applied for it. I blew these people up. Almost every day I would call and call and call. And then eventually the guy who owned it was like, dude, filling that role isn't even a big priority. Like, I would just stop if I were you. And I was like, all good. But I now had the idea in my mind of working for a marketing agency, taking all these skills that I've learned, because in my mind, I was like, dude, I can run some fucking Facebook ads better than some motherfucker who went to college. I could do email marketing better than some random person who went to college. Like, I've tested hundreds of products at this point, and I knew how to send cold emails. I knew how to find decision makers. So I had a sense of hope because I was like, well, maybe making money online looks a little different from what I thought it looked like. Like, maybe I can just get a work from home job and learn all the skills that go into building an agency and then eventually building my own. And so I went to LinkedIn when I got home. I searched ecom email marketing, Klaviyo, and I found thousands of remote jobs, and I was like, holy shit, this may be the one. I got a bunch of hope. Again, the light bulb went off, and I took the skills that I learned with drop shipping and I combined them with the skills I learned with cold email, and I used that to get a job. So I put together this video that was very eye-catching, very attention grabbing, and I gave all the biggest tips that I would give an ecom brand to be able to scale their email revenue. And I took that and then I used the skills that I had with cold email, and I found the decision makers of these marketing agencies, and I blasted a bunch of emails. At this point, I probably only sent like 5 or 6. I put them in an email campaign sequence, sent like 5 or 6, and I instantly started getting responses. Out of my first 6, I think like 3 or 4 replied to me. And so I landed a ton of interviews. I was literally printing interviews. I was getting on maybe like 2 to 3 a week, right? I continued sending them more and more, and I got a ton of offers. Like, people loved the video, they loved me, they loved my energy. I would get on these interviews, I would totally smash the interviews. I came with a bunch of energy, with a bunch of sauce. I was like 21 years old. And so I ended up getting my first job at a pretty small marketing agency. They were doing maybe like 150 grand per month. And that maybe lasted for like 3 months. I wasn't experienced enough for a small company. In hindsight, it just wasn't the best for him or for me, because he needed someone more experienced because he was such a small and vulnerable company, and I needed someone with the experience to be able to teach me how to do it. And so, long story short, after 3 months, that didn't work out. And at this point, I was still in school because this was the summertime. In my mind, I had accepted that I'm not going back to school. I'm not re-enrolling for classes. And so I went through, again, I had gotten multiple offers from multiple different agencies. And so I went and I reached back out to one of the other agencies that had reached out to me, who I decided not to work with. I asked them if the job was still available. They said yes. Within 2 weeks, we were running again, right? This time, things were way much better. This was a lot more of an established company. I actually made more. I was making like 65 grand a year. I was making like 55 at the first one. And again, I felt like I was there. I was finally there. This particular company, they flew me out a couple times. So I'm sitting around, I'm in LA in this fancy ass restaurant, and these executives are talking about how impressed they were by my video, by how impressed they were by me, the fact that they made such a good hire by picking me. And they're asking me to explain to them the thought process behind that video that I put together. It was like, now I'm sitting here and I'm explaining my success and how I got here and how I'm so great in it. They're looking up to me almost. This is what I would consider was my first like real breakthrough. For the next 2 years, I completely smashed it in corporate marketing. I went on to become a senior at a different company. I work with some of the biggest companies in the world that you've probably heard of. AARP is one of them, which is like the biggest nonprofit. I had moved my girl in. Like, it finally felt like I'm living the life that I wanted to for 3 years. Because again, the journey started around 2018. Now we're at 2021. So I was like, I'm finally here. It didn't take long for me to realize that the corporate world was not where I wanted to be. Although on the surface, I had a pretty decent salary. I had a nice apartment. I was living in a high rise. I'm traveling whenever I want to. I have all this location freedom. I very quickly understood that this was not going to sustain me long term. After stepping into this more senior role, the expectations were insane. Some of these companies are paying the agency that I'm working at 100 grand a month. So it didn't matter if it was fucking Thanksgiving. It didn't matter if it was Christmas Eve. Like, it did not matter. If the client needed something, it was you were expected to get it to them when they needed it. And so I was pretty conflicted around this time, because on one hand, I had worked so hard for years and years to finally have this lifestyle. On the other hand, I got a taste of it, and after just a year or 2 years, I hated it. My dream very quickly turned into a nightmare. And so I came across another gentleman named Luke Alexander. And he would always talk about this thing called high ticket sales. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, it seems pretty simple. You just sell a service, you get a commission, you move on to the next one. And it seemed pretty familiar to what I was doing when I had sold that marketing agency client. And then I started to look within, and I realized that the funnest part of my whole marketing agency season wasn't even the job itself. It was me selling myself to these executives and getting the job. After I got the job, it would kind of die down and it wasn't really that exciting. And so I drew parallels from that to this thing called high ticket sales that Luke Alexander was talking about, and it planted a seed inside of me. So at this time, I had a friend and he would always post about high ticket sales on his story too. And so I reached out to him and I was like, yo, I kind of want to get into this high ticket sales thing. Like, how do I do it? What do I do? And he was like, yo, I'm gonna send you this course. Sent me a course. He said, go through it twice and let me know. I went through it twice. Within 2 weeks, I went through the entire thing twice. And this was probably like a 30-40 hour course. I just binged it. I wouldn't watch anything else. And so from there, he told me that he'll help me get a role, but he has to make sure I'm good first. And so we would role play almost every single week. I was terrible at the beginning, but as I started to get better and better, and then this dude just fucking ghosted me. He just disappeared. He stopped answering my texts. He just disappeared. I don't know what happened. At that point though, I was committed to making high ticket sales work, and I was committed to making this be the thing that I trade a corporate world for. And so I joined different communities. I would role play in those communities. I would just talk to different people. And I joined Caden Jar's community. That was the first ever community I ever joined. And I met someone named Connor Sunderland through that. His low ticket community was like $50 a month. And there was an offer for basketball trainers. It wasn't necessarily like a biz op. It was more so helping them with the infrastructure of their business. So helping them with training plans, helping them get students really good. It was run by one of the top basketball trainers in the whole world. He's worked with like LeBron and shit. And so I met with Connor and we role played and he was like, you're hired. He thought I was pretty good. But I very quickly learned that basketball coaches are pretty broke. So that didn't really last that long. It maybe lasted like 2 months and I left. I was like, yeah, this is not gonna work out. And at the same time I was leaving that offer, that friend who had ghosted me months prior, he randomly hit me back up and he was like, yo, I'm starting a sales agency. I need closers. Like, are you down to close? And so we had the conversation about just fucking ghosting me. And I was like, you're not gonna ghost me again, right? And he was like, nah. I was like, all right, bet, let's do it. So this was a biz op selling to nurses and I was terrible. I closed at 3% my first full month, and he saw something in me because he did not let me go and he continued working with me. But the business owner literally had no faith in me. Like, she had zero faith in me. She was certain that I was not going to make it, that I was not going to perform. And so I was working really hard on this offer at the time that my boy had put me on to. Basically what the offer was, it was a biz op to nurses. So we were teaching nurses how to open med spas was the offer. So I was grinding on this offer, plus I'm grinding on the marketing agency job. I was working from 9 to like 10 p.m. almost every single day between sales calls, client calls, and client work. And so I realized around February of 2023 that me putting all this effort into all these things means I'm actually not putting effort into anything. And I was spreading myself so thin and everything was failing. So I was like, I need to make a decision. So at this time, I quit my job. I quit this $90K a year job. And so in June of 2023, this is maybe 4 months now after leaving the corporate job, this was the second big risk I took, because the first big risk I took was dropping out of school. And then this was now the second big risk, is leaving the stable income that I had. And so now the third big risk that I took was in February is when I left the job. In June, I took a loan out for like 16 grand. And I invested into a coaching program. Reason this was one of the scariest things I'd ever done is because I always had this very scarce outlook on money. And so taking a loan out was terrifying to me. I also saw my parents drowning in debt growing up. So I was like, stay far away from debt. Pulled the trigger, got the loan. And this program really helped sharpen me up. But again, I really only made like 4 grand a month, was like my biggest month, even after joining the program, because I wasn't on the best offer. And so Apollo saw that, right? He saw me grinding really hard. He saw all the work I was putting in. He didn't have to do this. He went on his Facebook, he put out a post and was like, yo, I have this closer. He's really hungry. He's really talented. Does anyone have a role? And he made a bunch of intros for me. And that's when I came across Josh Johnson, who I am also super grateful for. Taught me a lot throughout this journey. And so Josh hired me. I sent him a couple calls that I did on the nursing offer. He was like, yo, this kid's good. He hired me on a real estate investing offer and I shit the bed. Like, I shit the bed bad. I was right back to 3% close rate. All this self-doubt started to spew within me. And the most frustrating part is, on this offer, there were guys making good money. There were guys making 10 to 15 grand a month. So I couldn't really use that excuse anymore, because previously it was just me my boy and the business owner, and the company as a total was maybe doing like 60, 70 grand a month total with all of us selling. And so my perspective is this, it's just not possible to make money here because no one is. And so to go from that to an environment where people are making money and then I'm still not performing, I was like, shit, maybe I'm not as good as I thought. Maybe this wasn't a good idea. And all the self-doubt started. My month on that offer, I made $1,100. My rent was like almost $2,000 at the time. And so $1,100, that wasn't paying anybody's bills. And I was fucking stressed. I give a lot of thanks to Josh Johnson because he saw something in me, and rather than firing me and kind of telling me to kick rocks, he was managing multiple offers at the time. And so he put me on another offer that he was managing. And this one was teaching people YouTube automation. This is where things really started to change because my first ever month, I made 6,200, which that was more than I had made even in corporate. The second month, I did 10 grand. Third month, I did like 9. Fourth month, I did like 9,500. And then the fifth month onward, it was 15K, 18K, 21K, 21K. It was consistently 15 to 20K a month from there. And this is where my life really started to change. This was my first time making what I would consider real money. I was able to take my family on an all-inclusive trip. My parents didn't pay a dime. I was buying cool shit for the people around me. I got my girl some Prada shades. I got some Louis loafers. I got my sister some Gucci shades. Like, this was my first time really getting to a bag. I was traveling more. I was really living that laptop lifestyle. This was 2024, so last year. And so I since parted ways with that offer after about 11 months. I kind of just wanted to move on. And I went on to sell another biz op called High Ticket Ecom with a fella named Brooke Hiddink, one of the biggest info offers in this entire space, doing like $1 to $2 million a month. I was consistently collecting like 150 grand a month on that offer. For one reason or another, I did not align with that team. I did not align with the culture, so I ended up parting ways there too. And before getting on this offer, while I was closing for Raz, this is why I started posting content. So I started posting objection handling videos. I didn't have any real direction when I was posting them. I didn't think I'm gonna do sales coaching or management. I was just like, these are some pretty solid clips. Like, why not post them? It's not gonna hurt. And so after a couple months of posting these, a gentleman named Davi reached out to me and he asked me if I do sales coaching. And I was like, I could, I guess. And so he was like, how much? And I was like, I don't know, 1,500 a month. And he was like, dude, let's do 2K. And he piffed on the spot and he paid me $2,000. And so within 3 months of us working together, his close rate went from about 17% to over 30% from him learning from me. His cash collected went from around like 30 to 50 grand a month to over 100. Again, this is in a 3-month time span. And this was the first person I ever worked with. He introduced me to then my second client. We fucking murdered it. I think their close rate went up like 200% in 6 weeks. They went from 20% close rate to like over 60%. This is in like a month and a half of them working with me. And this is after taking the same amount of live calls. So it's not like they took way less calls. They took the same amount of calls. And so since then, I've worked with close to 100 businesses and reps. And so it hit me that I might actually have something here. I can take the skill set that I have and I can give it to other people. I can teach it. And so that brings me to where I'm at today. I am managing and closing on an account, doing about 200 grand a month. I have a couple sales coaching clients. All in, I'm making about 30 grand a month. I have full control over my schedule. I live in my dream apartment, and I'm now able to facilitate the change within you that it took a long time to facilitate within myself. And so that's the whole purpose of this channel, is to give you so much free sauce so you could see what it took, at least in the 2 years that I went from quitting my corporate job to making over 30 grand a month. But more importantly, what it took the entire 5-6 years that ever since I first stepped foot into the space and falling flat on my face for years and years to getting here. I'm looking forward to growing with you all. If you made it this far, I appreciate you immensely. This is one of many. And as always, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe to join this journey that we're on here. I'll see you in the next one.